It's The World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast. Foreign editor Christopher Dickey is with us. Straight from the Ag Fair, you said.
Yes, it was great. I really enjoyed myself. And it's nice to have you back from the ski slopes.
Okay, all right. Many thanks. Well, nice to have James McCauley gracing our company, Paris correspondent for The Washington Post, freelance reporter Anne Penketh, who's also writing mystery novels these days, and Jean-Marc Four, the head of the foreign desk at Radio France.
Nice to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Former London correspondent.
Absolutely.
The World This Week on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag World This Week. Neither side will have exactly what it wants. Theresa May's long-awaited speech on the UK's post-Brexit relationship with Europe, often conciliatory, accepting the hard fact that Britain will have less access in the future to EU markets. The Prime Minister recognized that European rules, in particular the European Court of Justice, will have an impact post-Brexit on the UK. But she did also ask for a la carte sectors to be included in a final deal. This despite repeated warnings from Brussels that there can be no cherry picking.
If this is cherry picking, then every trade arrangement is cherry picking. Moreover, with all its neighbours, the EU has varying levels of access to the single market, depending on the obligations those neighbours are willing to undertake. What would be cherry-picking would be if we were to seek a deal where our rights and obligations were not held in balance. And I've been categorically clear that that is not what we're going to do. So we need to strike a new balance, but we will not accept the rights of Canada and the obligations of Norway.
The rights of Canada and the obligations of Norway. And Penketh, people are getting so into the minutiae that they know the different trade arrangements the EU has with other partner countries at this point.
Yeah, but the bottom line is that she is still trying to get a bespoke arrangement with the EU.
She's still trying to cherry pick.
She is, and that's what Michel Barnier has said, is completely off the table. But you can see that she's also trying to put forward some proposals whereby if I scratch your back, you can scratch mine. She's saying that, in fact, to me it sounded like a kind of soft Brexit that she was putting in place today, talking about how many things could be aligned with European regulations under Brexit, And
it's also vague that we don't know from one day to the next. On Wednesday, when Barnier talked about the EU negotiator talked about this backstop arrangement, she sounded like a hard Brexiteer and rebuffing him. Today, you're saying she sounds like a soft Brexiteer?
Yes, although she is still ruling out a customs union, which the Labour opposition in the UK has now backed, so I don't think that the issue of the customs union has come very much to the fore in the context of Northern Ireland, which, of course, is part of Britain, and the soft border, which both sides say they want, is posing huge problems. Theresa May has kept on saying that she wants to bring forward some innovative solutions to this problem, which has still not been solved, and yet they haven't done so. And so Michel Barnier, in the draft text which they put up this week, they said, look, if you don't put up a solution, here's one. Let's have the border in the North Sea. In the Irish Sea, sorry. And that was completely ruled out by Theresa May. So they've been at each other's throats all week.
Jean-Marc Four, so much build-up to this speech this Friday. Did you hear any innovative solutions from Theresa May?
No, I don't think. I think it's not still very clear, actually. You probably remember the front page of the British magazine The Economist a year ago. It was Theresa May be. We're still with that. I mean, we don't know exactly what she believes in. I mean,
But is that just part of
what does she think herself? I'm not sure whether she thinks something about that.
Are we being too hard? Is it just because it's a negotiation, so you don't put all your cards on the table?
I think she's in the middle of a very complicated domestic politic stuff. You know, it's large part of the Tory party is very pro-hard Brexit, with growing figures like Jacob Rees-Mogg or even Boris Johnson, and you've got a small part of the Tory party that is next to Labour regarding to Brexit, and it's very difficult for her, I think, and she doesn't want to choose. That's the story.
After earlier in the week spelling out that backstop plan that would keep Northern Ireland in the customs union, the EU chief negotiator warning as well that the clock was ticking on a final deal, only 1 year to go.
The UK is closing the door on itself, one by one. And the only possible model that remains is that of the free trade agreement, as we did recently with Canada, we are dealing with Japan or Korea.
Now, Barnier, Chris Radicki, has since tweeted after listening to the speech this Friday, I welcome Theresa May's speech about the UK leaving the single market and customs union, and recognition of trade-offs will inform the European Council.
You know, Francois, I can't tell you how boring all this is. I mean, the fact is, they want a bespoke agreement in the UK. They had a bespoke agreement. Part of the problem that the EU had for years was that Great Britain had a major voice in the councils of the European Union, and it kept cutting these special deals and watering down the kinds of things that many people in the EU wanted to do. Now it's in a position where it is withdrawing from the EU, and it has no voice in the European Union at all. So its only voice is the voice of a trading power that says, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, we'll work out a deal. But the problem is that they are so tightly interwoven with Europe after generations. It isn't just as simple as you scratch my back and I scratch yours. This is not, I have something to sell, you have something to buy. This is like a really nasty divorce. And to pretend that it's not is, I think, a misperception.
Are you as bored, James Macaulay?
I share some of the sentiment, yes. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm not sure. Like everybody here, I listened to the speech today, and I agree with you. I'm not sure where we stand after, as we said, 20 months of this. I mean, it is not clear to me at all, sort of, what is different now than it was sort of just a few weeks ago. I'm not sure that there is any sort of definitive...
Yeah. But it's so hugely important.
Confusion on the way to a
that's
complication.
Exactly the problem, isn't it?
The problem is, for us, it's boring. But I mean, for the Irish people, for example, it's not boring. I mean,
well, and what about a Brit like me living in France? What about all the French people living in the UK?
But it's boring that there's no decision on these things. But it's boring that there's no decision on these things.
I talked yesterday to the Irish ambassador in Paris, Patricia O'Brien, and she was just coming back from the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and she told me, you can go there. I went there a few years ago, and she said, the point is, there's nothing to see. Nothing's happening there. And that's the whole story today, I mean. And if there is a border, it changes everything. It's not a matter of business. It's a matter of peace, basically. It's a matter of people living together.
I don't believe that. I know that one of the arguments is that they say, if we put checkpoints back in place, we're going to have a hard border and we're going to have the men in balaclavas again. But the Irish people and the Northern Irish, they don't want to return to the Troubles.
But then where is the border? The border is in the Irish Sea.
No, but surely. I don't think this is going to be sorted out at the beginning of the negotiation, but I think with a bit of imagination and technology, it must be possible, surely.
Technology? So you believe what, in those automated checks that they're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
But this is all endless workarounds. This is all endless workarounds to try and recreate something that already existed. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what's so crazy about this whole thing. There's a lot of things that people don't even begin to talk about. I was talking to a French bureaucrat, a friend of mine, who was saying, what's going to happen to the tunnel between here and London? You know, in fact, there are all kinds of protocols and security arrangements and inspection agreements that are covered by EU treaties that will have to be dealt with separately now. And it isn't clear at all that the British are going to come up with the right answers. It's all got to be redone again and again and again, endlessly at every detail. Is this a stupid policy? It is a stupid policy. Let's just be clear.
All right, let's change our focus here to elsewhere on the European continent, where there's perhaps another crisis brewing, and that is when the ballots are counted Sunday night in Italy. As an often bitter and sometimes violent election campaign draws to a close, attention has shifted from the faltering of the center-left to the rise of a 31-year-old new face of the populist five-star movement, and the return of a familiar face. A familiar face that's literally a half-century older. Silvio Berlusconi, seen here at a joint appearance with his far-right and right-wing coalition partners Thursday in Rome. By the way, if you were wondering if Il Cavaliere was feeling the Me Too effect, well, on the competition for votes with the anti-establishment five-star movement, here's what he had to say.
The five-star movement is dangerous because they're against everything and everybody. They have to let off steam. Let's give a piece of advice to women so they vote the right way. First, beat up your husbands. So once you've let off some steam, they'll vote for us.
Careful, because the husband will be angry and vote for the five-star movement, as everyone who's angry does.
And Pankit?
Good grief, well, the mummy, at least, he's not going to be back in charge, is he? Because he's barred from holding public
for
office.
another year.
Thank
1 year.
goodness. Thank
He's
goodness.
a puppet master.
Sorry.
He's a puppet master, actually. And he's got a puppet, who's Antonio Tajani. And he could be the prime minister.
Yeah, he is a puppet master. He is a puppet master. That's true.
Yeah, well, the real problems are Salvini and Meloni, the people to his right, and they really are unacceptable in classical European political terms. They are fascists and far right. And Meloni is running with this nostalgia for Mussolini. She's appearing on stage with Mussolini's granddaughter. It's this fascist. They made a few mistakes, but the fascists were okay. And Salvini's rhetoric is wildly right-wing, and Berlusconi has tried to catch up with him. So Salvini says, I'm going to deport 100,000 Africans. And what does Berlusconi say? I'm going to deport 600,000 Africans. It makes Trump seem rational. And they are going to win. That coalition is going to win, by all accounts.
By the way, Steve Bannon was seen walking the streets of Rome this Friday.
Oh, there you go. He's going to be apparently he's going to be seeing Newt Gingrich, who spends a lot of time there since his wife is the ambassador to the Vatican.
James Macaulay, when you look at what's at stake in this Italian election.
Well, I mean, I guess building on what you just said, Chris, I think it, in a way, like, yes, it is particularly shocking, the overt allusions and nostalgia to this fascist past. But then again, that's not sort of specific to Italy, and I think sort of all over Europe, and even in the United States, it must be said, there is a sort of reliance on historical revisionism as a sort of political weapon in this particular moment. Now, why that is, I think it's a sort of very complicated and overdetermined answer. But I mean, I think in Europe in particular, it has to do with the kind of the Brussels consensus after the war. And this is the most powerful language in which to indict the kind of precepts that have bound Europe together since 1945. And I don't know, I see that. And then on the other hand, I think you, Francois, mentioned this very briefly in your intro, but it is yet another example of the faltering and impotent center-left, which, I mean, in France, the once almighty Socialist Party, I mean, they've even had to sell their mansion on the Solferino. I mean, it's something we're seeing everywhere, and I think it's a mistake to sort of talk about it as if it's sort of one broad stroke, because of course each national context has different factors that are at work, but the trend does stand, and you're seeing this coalition that once had real power in Italy just vanish from the stage, and people fall back to Berlusconi because there's a void on the right as well, and so voila. But I mean, that to me is a very European story that we've seen all over the place.
Well, it's not good news. I mean,
it's not just Berlusconi, though, is it? It's the five-star movement. If you look at their popularity in Sicily, for example, it's huge. I mean, they're probably going to have a landslide there. They're definitely going to dent the Berlusconi coalition's popularity.
Yeah, but I mean, on the other hand, when they got the mayor's office in Rome and they were completely incompetent, it's the vaffanculo attitude of the Italians, and particularly of Five Star. That was their slogan. That was,
Well, they are a bunch
yours.
of amateurs. I mean, literally, aren't they? Because they have not had experience of government.
Let's listen to what their leader says. He's 31 years old. And he says, effectively, forget their troubled runs in charge of cities like Rome and Parma. They're playing the untainted card.
They say they want to change the country, but then why didn't they change it when they ruled it for the last 20 years?
Why didn't they change it for the last 20 years?
Young people are very fond of the five-star movement in Italy. I mean, most of the support comes from young people. The trouble is for them that Italy is an old country. Most of the voters are old people. Like 40% are over 55 or something like that, I think. So that's why they're going to arrive first, most likely, but they won't be able to form a government. Because in Italy, in the mess of Italian politics, you have to be able to form a coalition, and they won't be able to form a coalition.
And they say they don't want to in any case.
And they don't want to, of course they don't want to.
Which is why Berlusconi's group will wind up winning the election.
Yeah, exactly. But I do agree with what James just said, but at the same time, I don't want to be rude with our Italian friends, but I think there's not that much at stakes in the Italian elections, because, it's going to be a mess on Monday morning, and, well, it used to be a mess before, and it's going to be a mess the day after tomorrow, and so on. It's Italy. I mean, sorry to put it that way. I think there is much more at stakes in the vote of the members of the SPD in Germany.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, because the center-left losing power in Italy is one thing, but SPD voters are voting in a secret ballot.
Exactly.
Voting ends Sunday in Germany to whether or not they join that grand coalition with Angela Merkel. You're saying that could be the top story on Monday morning, not the Italian election?
Yes, I think it's more important, actually. There are 400,000. We have 50 million Italian voters, but the 400,000 members of the SPD in Germany, that's important what they decide. Yes, I think so.
And you think there could be a surprise they could vote down the grand coalition?
I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't know. I think it's very important for Europe too.
All the indications are that it's going to go through, though.
Yeah, I think so. But
obviously they're strange bedfellows, and I think
the
the big question is really how long can it possibly last? But I
think there is more at stakes for Europe, for example.
Well, part of it's also being driven by the far right in Germany, which scares people. I mean, basically, the SPD doesn't want to be in a position where they say we're not going to join the coalition, and then they open the door to more power for the AfD and for the right-wing parties. The far right-wing parties, they don't want to do that.
But it is true that while there is no, you can't, you have to look at each country in its own context, don't you? But I think there is one big theme which actually unites the people across Europe now, and this is migration. The AfD in Germany, and of course the migrants in Italy has been a huge issue there for people in Rome with all tens of thousands of people in the streets, has been across Europe.
We'll see which one, of course, tops the bill on Monday morning. When we come back, we're going to take a look at how the week has gone for Donald Trump, and it's been another tumultuous one. Stay with us. Welcome back. Before we resume the world this week, some of the stories we're following for you in the newsroom. Our top story is that standoff earlier in Burkina Faso's capital. At least 28 killed as suspected jihadists were thwarted when they attacked the French embassy, but wreaked carnage at army headquarters. Yes to following the same rules in some but not all sectors. UK Prime Minister Theresa May spells out her vision for Britain's post-Brexit relationship with the continent, admitting there will be hard choices to come. The Turkish Air Force bombs Syrian government-backed positions. They are backing up Kurdish militias defending against Ankara's offensive in Afrin. You'll see our exclusive report with our team there on the slow-going 7 weeks into Recep Tayyip Erdogan's campaign. And the final in our series on the Paris Agricultural Fair, this time with a focus on France's dairy farmers still feeling very much endangered 3 years after the liberalization of the dairy sector. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week. The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast. Foreign editor Christopher Dickey is back with us. Welcome back as well to James Macaulay, Paris correspondent for the Washington Post, freelance reporter Anne Penketh, and Jean-Marc Foul, foreign desk editor at Radio France. How do we put this? Rows, reconciliations, and resignations. Another typical week in Donald Trump's White House. Let's start with the row, and it's a big one, over steel and aluminum tariffs. The logic laid out in this early morning tweet, which I shall read to you. When a country, USA in parenthesis, is losing many billions of dollars in trade with virtually every country it does business with, trade wars are good and easy to win. Christopher Dickey.
You know, Francois, it's hard to gainsay these statements. Well, I think we have to see what retaliation there is from China. We're going to have to see how Canada reacts. We're going to have to see how there's reaction all over the world. A lot of places do use American steel. They're not going to want to use American steel anymore. It's not as much of a one-way trip as Trump is suggesting, but it fits in with his whole kind of approach to life and politics, which is the art of the deal. I'm the guy who can make the deal. And anybody else made any deals, free trade, anything like that, they didn't know anything. I'm going to show you how to make a deal. This from a guy who went bankrupt, I forget how many times. So we'll see how this plays out. Certainly there has been some dumping of steel on the American market, or at least American steel manufacturers have said that again and again. But it isn't clear to me that American steel manufacturers are in fact able to compete in the domestic market or the international market. And it also isn't clear to me how all the companies that depend on the steel that they get from China and elsewhere will function without it.
All right, it's been denounced already by the likes of Canada, Beijing, Berlin, and also Brussels.
We will not sit idly while our industry is hit with unfair measures that put thousands of European jobs at risk. The EU will react firmly and commensurately to defend our interests.
And Penketh, you remember back that Brexit campaign in 2016, one of the issues for a lot of working class voters who voted for Brexit was the EU's not sticking up for us when it comes to steel dumping particularly.
Exactly. When I heard that this morning, I thought, this is Trump talking to his base. You know, there'll be happy campers there in Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh, you know, except that as we have found out with Brexit, and we are seeing in America, that those people will actually end up being the worst affected by the decisions that Donald Trump is taking. And never mind the stock exchange today, the Dow Jones lost 300 points. I mean, well, why ask the question? Does he think before he opens his mouth?
Yeah, he thinks about those people in Pennsylvania and people in the steel industry.
Everything he says, I think, is based on that. I mean, you know, he talks to his voters and his domestic base.
But are those kinds of views popular beyond the U.S. borders? Because there are a lot of people who maybe see his side of the argument on this side of the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, I think he just doesn't care. I mean, he's just talking to his voters.
But in this particular case, it's actually U.S. allies who are going to be particularly hit by it, including South Korea. South Korea, Canada, and Europe.
Germany,
yeah.
James Macaulay, the argument over steel again, it's playing out. It's being denounced. His words in
overseas,
overseas
in Europe, yes.
But how's it going to play at home?
I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see. Because of course, yes, it plays into the promise to the base that we've had from the beginning. But then again, I mean, if you look at yes, like in theory, perhaps it might create some jobs in these places, but then other jobs might be lost by the same token. Because right now, if you bring in steel to the U.S., let's say it comes, it's shipped into New Orleans and it's driven up to production plants somewhere else. I mean, there might be a disincentive to discontinue this whole chain of commerce, and so I'm not sure it's.
Well, and if you add 20% to the cost of the steel that goes into an automobile, the cost of the automobile is going to go up.
And so prices can be affected, consumers can be affected. I mean, we don't know what will happen yet. It's too early to tell, but it's not to say that there will just be the effect on the demographic that he's talking about. It will be a much bigger impact.
That's the route part. Let's talk about the reconciliation part. Earlier in the week, Trump surprised many when he suggested common ground with Democratic lawmakers on gun control. This in the wake of the Florida high school shooting that left 17 dead 2 weeks ago. Trump, in his remarks on Wednesday at the White House, even taking on the National Rifle Association.
Some of you people are petrified of the NRA. You can't be petrified. They do have great power, I agree with it. They have great power over you people. They have less power over me, and I'm a fan of the NRA. I mean, there's no bigger fan. I'm a big fan of the NRA. They want to do right. These are great people. These are great patriots. They love our country. But that doesn't mean we have to agree on everything.
So is it finally shifting on gun control if you have Donald Trump?
Yeah, I'm not...
No, I don't think so.
Oh, no, I didn't.
No, please, James.
No, I mean, I just think, look, I mean, first of all, yes, that meeting happened earlier this week, but then, today, or I guess, was it today or yesterday? Yesterday evening, the NRA's top lobbyist was at the White House, and then after that meeting, we have the word that, the president thought that it was a really successful exchange and that we're sort of all on the same page. And I think, we saw something very similar with the Dreamers a few months ago, and it was, it seemed like, the president was amenable to a discussion with Democrats and sort of open to their line on the issue, but then when the time came, the White House basically sabotaged this agreement.
But the story's not going away, James, and we're seeing that there's going to be these marches now. There's at least 3 of them coming up.
Well, there were lots of women's marches after the inauguration as well. I'm not sure how much the marches will impact the president's decision. Yeah. So we'll see. But I just think it's a mistake to read too much into the first meeting that he had this week with like Dianne Feinstein sitting right next to him smiling. I'm not sure what kind of concrete meaning that has for us right now.
Well, also, that was him speaking about his base. Basically, he was saying to the NRA, my base in these groups is stronger than your base, and I will do what I want to do. But the truth is he's not going to do what he wants to do, or who knows what he wants to do. What he's going to do is essentially wind up in lockstep with the NRA, because the NRA is going to play for time. That's what they always do. The students who are leading the protests in the United States, who've mobilized such opinion in the United States to keep up this whole question of rational gun control, they're all going to go on summer vacation. The NRA knows that, and they think that the entire momentum is going to drop out of this movement.
I'm not that pessimistic. I don't know. It could be a turning point. Nevertheless, I think the protests could go on, and something could happen. I think the jury is still out.
They've been talking about a generational shift on this.
Might be the case.
Topic.
I don't know. I think it's too early to say. I think the jury is still out to know whether it's a turning point or not.
Well, one of the things that one hopes is happening is that young people, the same kind of young people who are protesting, are registering to vote. Everybody talks about the Second Amendment in the United States, because that's the amendment that supposedly guarantees the right to bear arms, to carry guns, to do all the things the NRA talks about. Right now, maybe the most important amendment is the 26th Amendment, which gave 18-year-olds, every American citizen who is 18, has the right to vote in the United States. Traditionally, they don't. If they do, and they are still mobilized in November, then we are going to see a major turning point and a real political impact for these emotions. But we'll see. November's a long way away.
Before we move on, Christopher, your reaction to all the changes in the White House this week. There's another top advisor who's resigned, and of course that security clearance downgrade for the president's own son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who's tasked with dealing with Middle East peace, justice reform, relations with Mexico.
And he needs a top secret clearance to do any of those things effectively. Not that he's been very effective. But the question has been raised again and again by, among others, Congressman Ted Lieu from California. Why does this guy have a security clearance at all? Because when you fill out the forms, which you need to fill out to get a security clearance, you're allowed one or two mistakes. But in Jared Kushner's case, there were multiple mistakes again and again, and they kept going back to him and saying, could you fill this out again? Nobody but Jared Kushner would ever have gotten even the provisional security clearance that he got if he weren't the son-in-law of the President of the United States.
Your newspaper reporting on how there's at least 4 foreign powers who've tried to figure out what's the best way to flatter him and get more influence with him.
Right. Another potential issue with the security clearance, yes.
Well, they see him as vulnerable because his company, his family company, is billions of dollars in debt. And they need desperately, particularly with one building, they desperately need financing, and they're not getting it. So you have, for instance, the Sheikh Zayed in Abu Dhabi saying to people, I guess somebody was listening in on the phone, we can do something with this guy. What can we offer him? Now, what we don't know is whether Kushner took any of those deals. It doesn't look like he did.
As far as I understand, it's not very clear either why he lost this security clearance. What are the
Well, he never should have had it. He lost it because he never should have had it.
Yeah, but okay, you've got a point. But there must be some kind of explanation. I mean, official reasons. I haven't seen it. I haven't read it. Do you know why?
It was General Kelly's decision, the chief of staff. I mean, you have an adult in the room who's starting to make me think about Alexander Haig, actually, a guy who might step forward and say, I'm in charge.
Well, he was a lunatic.
By the way, one of the nations figuring out how to flatter Kushner, according to the Washington Post, is China. China, where this week we got confirmation that the rubber stamp parliament is going to be lifting term limits for President Xi Jinping. That was in the air ever since no heir was designated at last fall's Communist Party Congress. At 64, Xi could be in charge for a long while yet. Term limits were put in place as a reaction to Mao's cult of personality. Is authoritarian rule again going to become one-man rule in China? Here's what you get at the daily Foreign Affairs press briefing if you ask that question.
I suggest that you bear in mind the development of Chinese socialism and view these amendments to the Constitution in a positive manner. As for the guessing and speculation in the media, I hope you can take heed of the call of the Chinese people.
And in fairness, Anne Pankit, when we talked about this on this very set a few nights ago, it is the call of the Chinese people. Xi Jinping is popular and they want him to stay on as president.
Well, my understanding, though, that this decision has been aired, online to a great deal, and it's not very popular with the people who are going online and whose tweets and on WeChat was all shut down.
Well, of course, it's of two views. Temporary bans, it's true, are back on social media. Expressions like emperor and immortality are banned. And for Xi's supposed doppelganger, Winnie the Pooh, he's gone as well. This after cryptic Weibo messages like this one. Find the thing you love and stick with it. We could show you one more that's definitely a no-no. Let's bring that one up. Ah, yes, that not good at all. Is that Jean-Marc Four? But there are a lot of people who say she is popular, and Why shouldn't
Yes, the truth is we don't know exactly whether it's popular or not because of censorship. That's the reason. I mean, as far as I understand, our correspondent in Beijing say that part of the Chinese people believe yes, he's a kind of a spiritual master. You know, with this title of Ling Xiu, they say in Chinese, which was the title of Mao Zedong. And so part of the Chinese people are very fond of Xi Jinping. At the same time, there is huge censorship. I mean, this guy, he just doesn't like the free press. He just doesn't like the free speech. I mean, he's a control freak. He wants to control everything from the cloud to the VPN, the virtual private network for the computers, and the press and so on. I mean, so...
But this is not just him. This is a communist system.
It's worse.
I mean,
it's worsening. It's worsening.
But, okay, so here's the question. Tighter and tighter grip on power and censorship, and on the other hand, a country that's more and more engaged economically around the world. So if you're an investor, is that going to scare you away? Because
I don't think so.
and it seems like it's not. The censorship isn't scaring investors away.
No.
Well,
I think that looking at this from, I used to work in Moscow during Soviet times, and the Chinese looked at what was happening there, and they thought, we are not going to have this chaos in our country. So the pact that the Chinese have with their people is you can have economic freedom, but you're not going to get the political freedoms that Gorbachev gave his country.
But the reasoning of foreign investors was, okay, yeah, but after a while, when they've been exposed to the outside world, when a core middle class starts to build up in China, it will open up and all these censorship levers will eventually fall. The opposite, as Jean-Marc is saying, is what's happening.
But what business cares about is stability, isn't it? The protection of their investments there. That's the sort of thing they're looking at. They're looking at 1.4 billion consumers. Wow, you know?
Yeah. I think maybe the most destabilizing question is if she drops dead tomorrow of a heart attack, which is conceivable, who's next? Before, there was always a sense of a ladder of succession within the Chinese Communist Party. Now, when you have someone who's essentially going to be president for life or is creating a situation where he could be, what he's doing is pushing aside everybody who might be seen as a potential successor. Now, that doesn't really speak to stability because you have this entire pyramid of power and the economy resting on its point, which is this one man.
And people are talking about it's still a giant with feet of clay, with desperately needed reform in things like the finance sector and land reform not complete. One-man rule, could it be the undoing of China's rise?
Well, if it's the undoing of China's rise, it could be the undoing of China, and that would not be a happy thing. I think everybody would like China to remain as stable as possible, yes, with more freedom, but I don't, as Jean-Marc says, I don't think the people are clamoring for more freedom.
James Macaulay? Because now I'm seeing, we're talking about Weibo, but now it's effectively online shopping sites have become in China the place you go to, the equivalent of Amazon is the place you go to get your news as well. Everything seems so controlled.
Yeah, I mean, I share the concerns over all of that. I mean, I think for me, one interesting question in this recent turn of events is what kind of example might this set for other leaders around the world in this moment in time? You know, who yes, like run countries with vastly different political traditions, we know, but seek to consolidate their power in a moment of increasing global instability. And this is the era of strongmen, isn't it? And might there be room for repeats of this in other national contexts? I mean, who's to say that it's not?
Well, the other countries don't have 1.4 billion consumers, but every two-bit dictator in the world has said at some point, look at the Chinese model. And I think you're exactly right. I think that's only going to get worse.
It's only going to get worse, but could Xi Jinping be the rock star at Davos he was a year ago after lifting of term limits? Can he still be he presented himself in front of those investors as the defender of the liberal order. Can he still do that, though, now if he lifts these term limits?
Well, I mean, it's an open question, isn't it? I mean, I think, look, like the human rights, conditions in China have really are not in a good place, and they haven't been for a very long time, and that certainly hasn't stopped him from being well received in these kind of places. So I'm not sure that this would change things.
Well, and if you look at the technology that they're acquiring, exploiting, and improving, including a very sophisticated facial recognition technology, it's going to be very, very much a big brother society.
Exactly, it is already.
Yeah, and much worse.
And after the lifting of term limits, and you look back at that recent visit by France's president to China, do you look at it differently? The visit where Emmanuel Macron goes and tries to lecture him about the Belt and Road Initiative, and
I wouldn't say that. It wasn't a surprise. I mean, France wants to, like everyone, France wants to do business with China, and that's it. And forget about, Big Brother and so on, and who cares? I mean,
Those are internal problems.
But at the same time, I'm told that not everyone in the Chinese Communist Party is happy with that. So we have wait and see a little bit what's happening, because
But she has a very strong record of eliminating his opponents.
Yeah, that's true.
A lot of them are in prison now, who used to be billionaires.
we're going to leave it there. I want to thank Christopher Dickey, Anne Penketh, James McCauley, Jean-Marc Four. Stay with us, though. Media Watch is next. We say hello to Charlene James. How are you?
Hi, good.
So the panel was a little underwhelmed by Theresa May's speech. How were the reactions across the channel?
Yeah, so let's take a look at how the internet reacted. It actually was a trending topic globally in the hours after her speech. So there was a lot of chatter about this.
Boring.
So let's take a look at how people were talking about it. They were using the hashtags "Let's Get On With It," which is straight out of her speech there, and also "Road to Brexit," which is the moniker that her office gave to this series of speeches. People obviously having fun with that name because it's the internet, using this to create their own little memes of how they thought things were going. There she is on the edge of a cliff, or this one that was shared quite a bit as well. Here's her road to Brexit. So, but seriously too, though, European politicians were taking to Twitter to talk about the speech as well. Michel Barnier, the chief EU Brexit negotiator, saying, "I welcome Theresa May's speech. Clarity about UK leaving single market and customs union and recognition of trade-offs will inform European Council guidelines for future trade agreements." So there was some debate actually online as to whether this was agreeing, like a positive tweet, or whether it was a sort of a threat. So that was something that was being debated there too, which was interesting. And then German politician Manfred Weber, who leads the center-right European People's Party group in the European Parliament.
Yeah, the largest bloc.
Yeah, saying this is not a very positive tweet here.
No, this is not very positive.
As you can read.
No.
And of course, Boris Johnson getting into the mix, as usual. And he was actually supposed to be there at the speech, but was stuck in Budapest due to weather and wanted to bring it back around to something that everybody can get behind in the European continent, which is weather. So he was saying he was not there to listen in person. As I hoped, as I've been delayed by our common European winter weather on which we will remain in full alignment.
All right, there you go. Here in France, everybody's gearing up because tonight's the French equivalent of the Oscars,
That's
the
right.
César Awards for
right.
French cinema.
The internet is actually having just award show fever in general right now, because in America it's the Oscars on Sunday as well. So that's the #1 trending topic in America. But here in France, the César Awards are having their own Me Too moment. And this follows after we saw at the Golden Globes and the BAFTA Awards, where people were wearing black and wearing pins. At the César Awards, they're going to be wearing white ribbons. And this is part of a larger campaign that more than 100 actresses have signed on to, called Now We Act. In French, it's Maintenant on agit, where they want to combat violence against women. So Diane Kruger, Vanessa Paradis, and also American actress Rose McGowan, who was one of Harvey Weinstein's accusers. This is her right here. This is on their website. And she is also signed on to this as well. So that's a little bit of a connection to the original Me Too campaign as well. This is from their website. I'm just going to start this video while I tell you a little bit more about it. But it is part of a bigger campaign they want to say, pierce the wall of silence that has been so dominant for women, actresses, but also other female members of the entertainment industry for so long. And what they want to achieve is, this is another part of the initiative, I'm not losing you here yet, it's 50-50 for 2020. So they are also pushing getting gender parity in arts communities.
Jean-Marc Four, let me ask you about this, because white ribbons at the Césars. What's the reaction of the French public? Are they saying this is great, or are they saying, oh, we're just parroting what Americans are doing?
No, I think they're all right with it. I mean, that's fine. No, I think they agree, most of them, yeah.
There has been some pushback in some of the papers saying, okay, what are ribbons actually going to do? What is this going to do for women, the general public? And that's also why they've wanted to start this campaign, the 50-50 by 2020, to actually take it out of not just actresses, not just the people who walk the red carpet, but also show that, okay, we're going to work for the people who are working as directors, camera women, writers, producers, and try to get gender equality for you guys as well.
In the entertainment, more broadly, the entertainment industry. Shari and James, I want to thank you very much, and we'll, of course, have full coverage of the Césars later here on our channel. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in The World This Week.